Hello everyone and welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of Summer Game Fest Play Days.
Say the right name.
Key 3.
There it is.
2022. This is the last interview of the show. Everything is pretty much over.
Save the best for last.
In terms of LA, but yes, we have saved the best for last. Tam and I are joined by Harvey Smith from Arkane.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're just out here. We showed the very first look at Redfall gameplay. Team's hard at work back home, but I was happy to come out and show that off and be part of the whole Bethesda Xbox game show. You know?
So how long ago did you start working on Redfall?
God, it was pre-pandemic. Feels like
before
a
times.
1,000 years. Yeah, like games are already hard, and this is our most ambitious game ever. At the beginning of this project, Ricardo and I were like, you know, we need to take a creative risk. I had been on 8 years worth of Dishonored stuff through all the, Dishonored 1, Knife of Dunwall, Brigmore Witches, Dishonored 2, Death of the Outsider. He had been on 8 years of stuff like Dishonored 1, those DLCs for Dishonored, and then Prey, and then Moon Crash, which I think he was like creative director of. And so we wanted to shake things up a little bit, and we're like, can we take the Arkane DNA, all the things people love, the layers of narrative, the game mechanics that could be, overlap in interesting, creative ways, surprising ways, the immersive movement in the body and all that stuff, RPG level up, so somewhere between a shooter and an RPG. Can we apply that to open world? Can we let you play single player? Can we let you play multiplayer? And so we set out to do that, and then the pandemic happened, and it just was like, here, catch this anvil, So how long has it been? I honestly don't know. All I know is that we're trying to final the game now for early next year.
Right.
How do you know as a team where to take a risk on something or where to be like, no, we maybe need to pare that back or dial it down a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's really like what you want production for. You have this whole team of people that are project planners. Susan Kath, we worked with for years now on the Dishonored 1 DLC and Prey. And then about halfway through this project, she moved into a business director role. Still around, still working with us. But Ben Horn and Aaron Carter took over as the leads of production, and they've been amazing. And so they're ideally, their job is to time box things. Like, I know you want to do this thing, but you only have this much time. You can tell me that you want to make trade-offs, but, and then our job is to, force them not to do that, right? Like, our job is to, make the game as great as it possibly can be. But it's a constant struggle, basically. And traditionally, Arkane has been more design-driven than anything, and I think that's still true. But it just helps bringing sort of like a mature attitude about production. It helps people not work overtime. It helps features not get cut. But it's still chaos. It's still a crazy process where, you're simultaneously trying to put cooler and cooler, deeper things into the game while other people are saying, no, that doesn't fit, we have to lose something, what do you do? And it's organic all the way through.
Right. Obviously, you talked about it being a big creative risk for you, and I imagine for a lot of people who are seeing the game for the first time, it's going to be quite a shock to the system, knowing what Arkane has done previously, like whether it's Dishonored or Prey or whatever it may be, Deathloop. There's been a kind of like a lineage that is very easy to see, and this feels quite different from it. So I think a lot of people are probably going to be like, where are the Arkane bits, and how do you kind of speak to those dyed-in-the-wool Arkane fans who are looking for the experience they know and love from you in there?
Yeah, so first of all, I feel like you just tried to get an immersive sim pun over on me. That's shock to the system. But that's a good question. Like, one of our, all of our games, like Venn diagram, right? None of them are a perfect circle. Prey is probably the most pure immersive sim that Arkane's ever done. Dishonored overlaps heavily with it, but has a stronger focus on stealth. Prey more on physics. The themes of Prey are all empathy. Dishonored is like abuse of power and wealth imbalance and things like that. How people act when they're in the worst possible situation. Deathloop is something different. It's done by the Lyon team, Dinga and Sebastian Mitton, those guys, and it's brilliant. I didn't work on it, but it added multiplayer in this brilliant way, right? So none of our games overlap perfectly. None of them are purist in any way, but they are infused with the same creative values, right? Moon Crash is a roguelike, but it still feels like an Arkane game, and I feel that way about Redfall. Like, again, every square foot of the game is like has history and has narrative. Your movement through the world feels very immersive as you slide and climb and get into gunfights with people. Your RPG progression is not just about guns, it's also about your character's powers and how you level up. And so the way we conceive of a world, a setting, and try to make it as plausible as possible, and the character, the setting is actually a character in a way. It's like Dunwall or Talos or the city of Redfall. And so I think those people are going to be pleasantly surprised. There's a reason why we drove so hard to keep the single player pure. When you play single player, you don't play with bots. Like, I'm a big Left 4 Dead fan, but this game is not like Left 4 Dead. It does not have you running around with 4 or 3, other colorful characters talking. If you play solo, you play alone. You pick your character, LAYLA, Jacob, Remy, Devinder, whichever one, and you play through. And then if you want to add a friend, you can. A lot of people, I think, are going to play with a roommate or a partner or something, just 2-player. But if you go up to 4, it becomes more like a party. But there's still a stealth component. The AI is still perception-based, sight and hearing. We still have like surprise kills. There's a lot of stuff that you will lore books everywhere. Lots of dynamic dialogue. The characters talk, and based on context, based on what's going on in the world, they say different things. Based on which characters they're playing with, they say different things. So it's very much an Arkane game.
Well, going back to the stuff about like the narrative, and you mentioned themes and maybe abuse of power and that kind of stuff. What is the theme for Redfall then?
Yeah, so Ricardo Bear worked with our narrative team internally. Evan Narcisse worked on the game. We have a group of people internally that work with Ricardo. The writing was divided between all of them. But we knew up front that what we wanted was certain thematic elements, right? Like vampires are a metaphor, like monsters are a metaphor. And our vampires kind of represent like a tiny, tiny percentage of people, like the 0.01%, who have everything, and they have it by preying on everyone else and just draining the life out of everyone else as the world burns down around us, right? And so that's kind of where we started. The people who, they were already vampires, before even becoming vampires. At some level, they already lack humanity, lack empathy for the people around them. They come in and they destroy communities. They hollow them out from the inside. And so there are a lot of themes related to those things. There are a lot of themes related to community. Like we have this whole game system called Take Back Redfall, where you capture neighborhoods one at a time and make them safer by doing some safe house missions, finding a safe house, doing some safe house missions, taking down an underboss who's kind of a bootlicker to the vampire gods, and securing that neighborhood. And your missions are launched out of like bases that are effectively civic centers. Like the first one is a fire department, right? So somewhere down there's this concept of like people, neighbors need to come together. We all live in this community. Let's band together. Let's feed the hungry. Let's help the vulnerable, and let's fight back against these predators. And those themes are kind of like, they're subtle. It's not in your face, but I think that's what, it's really not for me to say. It's really when the game comes out for you to say, actually. But like that's what I would like you to take away from it.
There have obviously been so many interpretations of vampires and vampire mythos over the years across every medium known to man. So where were you sort of and the team picking and choosing from? Or is it like you wanted to do, okay, no, this is the Arkane take on vampires?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think
Any Twilight in there?
Yeah, I signed a bunch of autographs earlier for Dishonored and Prey fans at the Bethesda Xbox event or Xbox Bethesda event, I think I was supposed to say. But
This is your event now.
Yeah, it's fine.
Claim it.
But there was a guy who literally said, "Do you think there'll be a Twilight tie-in?" I don't know if he was joking or not. But we wanted to put our own spin on vampires as science-based, psychic, leeches essentially on society, narcissists, and people that don't have that human connection with the people around them, with their neighborhood or whatever. And so some of it was just driven by that. Some of it was driven by the brilliant concept art that Patrick, our lead concept artist, did, and our art director Karen, guided him through that. And so our vampires were a unique creation, of course, but we do have an orientation that we do with new team members, where they hire on, and Ricardo and I walk them through a cultural orientation for Arkane, and then we also do one for the game that we're working on right now, which is Redfall. And we do have this one slide where it's like, this is not sparkly romantic vampires. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not what this is. These vampires are not aspirational. You don't want to be them. Like in the Anne Rice books, it would kind of be cool to be Lestat or something, right? But this is not this. They're horrible, right? And so we have the what they're not slide, where they're not particularly religious. They're not gothic or romantic. They're people that have traded away their humanity. So.
Are there any obviously one of the most interesting parts of it is there's always these figures of mystique in the world, obvious one's the outsider, and you kind of get to know that character, and it almost becomes you develop a sympathy with that character. Is it a cut and dry thing where the vampire's evil, or is it a case of maybe you'll learn something about them that perhaps are they sympathetic, is there nuance to the way they're depicted?
I know the right answer to that question, but there are sympathetic characters in the world, and there are characters that have suffered that work with you narratively, but our vampires are not sympathetic. They are just monsters, and they're intelligent monsters. They speak. They're full of personality, but no, they're not is he on the dark side or not? They're just 100%. Yeah.
That
Awesome.
seems like a lovely place to end it. Harvey, thank you so much for coming down and talking to us. I'm very excited to see more of Redfall.
Sure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and it was great to show the first look at Redfall's gameplay. And we are literally just at the moment where my voice is failing. So good timing.
Me too. That's why we're secretly wrapping it up.
Yeah.
But for more on Summer Game Fest, because obviously there are a couple more streams throughout the week, make sure to stay tuned to GameSpot.